Ahoy mateys, Captain Eric here, and welcome to part 2 of my Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl Ultimate Dream roster. Clearly excited by the announcement of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, I decided to take the base roster size of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate of 74 fighters and see if I could create the Nickelodeon version of that. In part 1, I went over all of the 90s characters that I wanted to feature on the roster, and in this episode, we're going to go over all of the 2000s characters I'd like to see on this roster. There will still be a part 3 that'll cover all of the fighters from 2010 and any of the extra assists or levels that I came up with that don't necessarily have a fighter represented, but I just wanted to get through the fighters first. Here we are 2 times in a row where I'm starting out my roster choices with a left field choice, but honestly, I don't think this character is as much of a left field choice as my last first choice. But for my first 2000s character, I am choosing Dora the Explorer, if that backpack didn't look familiar enough already. Dora the Explorer was created by Chris Gifford, Valerie Walsh Valdez, and Eric Weiner. First premiering on August 14th, 2000, the show Dora the Explorer lasted 8 seasons and had 178 episodes before finishing its run on August 9th, 2019. I really don't think it's out of the realm of possibility of having Dora in this cast of characters. I mean, she has a long and storied history with Nickelodeon and the brand, so I think she fits in place. She's family, she's here, she's familia. Originally, I wasn't even considering Dora the Explorer, but then I just couldn't get the thought out of my head of her smacking people with backpack. And it just kept reminding me of how Banjo uses his backpack in both his games and in the Smash Brothers games. So, once again, it's one little thought process, one connection to Smash Brothers, and I have to go with this character. And she's been around long enough that the fans that grew up with her are adults now who would absolutely love to pick Dora the Explorer to smack down some Spanish on the field. Now, as far as assists go, you can't go wrong with Boots. He is a staple of the series. He's Dora's best friend. He's one of the main characters of the show. But for the other assist of Dora the Explorer, I think it's pretty obvious what he's going to be doing on the field. And I'm talking about Swiper the Fox, probably swiping away item or maybe some of your health if he gets a hand on you. The Dora the Explorer universe is pretty fun, even though it's meant for a really young audience, and I think you could pull a lot from that in terms of its levels and its assists, and I certainly hope it's a show that can get some representation in All-Star Brawl. That's right, if you see a star and we're talking about Nickelodeon, it can only mean one thing: the Fairly OddParents. Now, depending on who you talk to, they may place the Fairly OddParents at an earlier point in this kind of pairing because they actually have their start on Nickelodeon all the way back in 1998, first premiering on Oh Yeah Cartoons, and through a run of shorts over the 3 years of that show, eventually would get their own spin-off show premiering on March 30th, 2001. Created by Butch Hartman, who would go on to create a slew of other Nicktoons under his time with Nickelodeon, the show lasted a whopping 10 seasons with 178 episodes. And of course, we can't bring any fighters from the Fairly OddParents without talking about the main star himself, Timmy Turner. Pun completely intended.
Hey! You made me make a poopy!
Timmy Turner has a storied history in Nintendo video games and even in his own show of using Cosmo and Wanda as weaponry, and I think it would be no different in my game as well. So Cosmo and Wanda, instead of being characters or assists themselves, they would just be assisting Timmy Turner, and it still would be following within the rules of the fairy godparents. As established in the show, Timmy is not allowed to use his fairies to win any contests. But as far as a video game is concerned, I would say that the rules are still being followed, since by using Cosmo and Wanda as a wide variety of skills, abilities, and weapons, they're just evening the playing field for Timmy himself. It's not really giving him any more of an advantage than any other character. It's just making him a viable fighter. So I think Cosmo and Wanda are completely following the rules in helping out Timmy in a game like this. Butch, I'm calling you out right now. I know you're out there in the YouTube universe. You can tell me in the comments whether I'm right or wrong. Technically, you're the guy who writes the rules. In hindsight, I do feel like Cosmo and Wanda just being relegated to Timmy's weaponry are a misuse of their characters. I understand that. So It's a thought I really just came up with on the spot right now, but what if one of Timmy's taunts was Cosmo and Wanda commentating about something like the stage, one of the characters they're fighting, just getting some back and forth while Timmy is fighting, and it would get some extra Cosmo and Wanda action in the game, which I would absolutely love, because more Cosmo and Wanda would be thumbs up for me. Get them in as much as possible. Put them in the menus, put them all over that game if you can, but yeah, being a part of Timmy's movesets would be the most logical place for them to be. Now, as I've mentioned before, I really like supervillains being a part of these games just as much as I like the heroes, and Mr. Crocker being Timmy's arch nemesis just makes sense for Crocker to be a fighter in this game. Honestly, because he has an impressive amount of technology that he can pull from to help be up against some of these other Nickelodeon heroes and villains. It would just be really funny to see Crocker fighting on a fairy world stage and just so engaged in this combat that he's completely ignoring all the fairies flying behind him. It would be funny to see. And if I could just, like pause everything for a second, if you could imagine right now the taunts that Mr. Crocker could possibly have.
Very good turns! Very good burns! Very good turns!
They're all gold. That alone makes him a viable fighter beyond all of the technology he has. Next up, it should be no surprise that, of course, I chose the Crimson Chin as another fighter from the Fairly OddParents. He is a superhero in the world of Timmy Turner. Timmy himself likes to travel inside of the comic books of the Crimson Chin to help him fight a slew of supervillains that lurk within the pages of the Crimson Chin. As, of course, Cleft the Boy Chin Wonder, an alternate costume, if you will, of Timmy Turner, which would just be excellent having the Crimson Chin there. I mean, right now, just pause. I know, another moment of pausing, but think about it. The Crimson Chin versus Powdered Toast Man versus Artie, the strongest man in the world. Come on. Come on. And of course, I would like to add Cool Timmy Turner as another alternate costume to have for Timmy. It would probably be the easiest task in the world to find 8 different unique costumes for Timmy Turner that could be alternate costumes in a fighter, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. One solid fighter is good enough. Any alternate costumes are just icing on the cake. When it comes to Fairly OddParents characters to pull from for assists, it's actually a tougher task than you would think. There's some obvious characters there, like Jorgen von Strangle here, who definitely would be an impending force on the field, and honestly could be a great fighter in his own right. You also have Vicky, who could bring out a slew of chainsaws and flamethrowers. You could actually do a lot with the babysitter here, but also another concert with Chip Skylark this time. Of course, singing Shiny Teeth and Me, and he'll sing no other song. Honestly, and I'm totally fine with replacing Chip with another Fairly OddParents character as an assist like Mark Chang. If there can at least be a level that takes place at a Chip Skylark concert and we can get like one of 3 different songs that play in the background, I'd be fine with that as well. But like I said, there are so many characters you could pull from. You can pull from any of the Crimson Chin villains, any of the other citizens of Dimsdale, Dinkelberg, Timmy's dad, Timmy's mom, any of the other fairies, the anti-fairies, the pixies. There are a ton of extra characters and content you can pull from. But once again, if you would like to see me do a deep dive into the Fairly OddParents to build its very own Smash Brothers style roster, let me know in the comments below. That is one I would love to dig into down the road. As mentioned previously, a level of Fairy World would make the most sense. It would also give the opportunity to show off a few of the characters I mentioned, at least on the fairy side, the chance to show up in the background and whatnot. The Tooth Fairy, some of the other characters, the April Fool, Santa Claus, but also there are so many other iconic locations in the Fairly OddParents that you could pull from. Timmy's bedroom, the front yard of Timmy's house. You could have Timmy's school. You could have the comic book of the Crimson Chin take over as a level. You could even go real deep cut and have an entire level based off of Crash Nebula, the made-for-TV movie that was meant to be a backdoor pilot for a Crash Nebula series. Next up, we're talking about another... Oh, wait till you get to green. Go to green. There we go. No! You tease. Next up, we're covering a show that also premiered on March 30th, 2001, Invader Zim. Created by Jonan Vasquez, Invader Zim is probably the biggest Nickelodeon cult show there is. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than Invader Zim, an entire show that lived on the lifeblood through its merchandise sales at Hot Topic and through its persistent fan base growing over the years, over this amazing piece of animation that was just kind of dumped into the laps of those who didn't know what to do with it, lived on and gained a status that lives on today as one of the greatest cult television shows of all time. And of course, Zim and Gur were already announced as characters in Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, rightfully so, and here they are the same way as a pairing together. I don't know to the extent of how much of Zim's moveset is going to include Gur. Gur didn't seem to be a character on his own. He seemed to just be partnered with Zim, but Zim also seemed to use other weapons that weren't Gur, so maybe Gur's just kind of there in the background, just making noise, eating tacos, dancing. Honestly, I'd be fine with that, just happening while Zim is fighting on the field, just Gur being a nuisance. I mean, it would be on brand for the character.
Gur? What does the G stand for?
I don't know.
Since we're here at Invader Zim, it should be mentioned that voice actor Richard Horowitz was actually asked about, or at least was brought up to the possibility of old voice clips from the Nickelodeon shows being used in the video game instead of the voice actors being brought in to produce new material or at least re-record lines. And he seemed to indicate that this is actually not possible. And it's rightfully so, depending on the contract signed. It could be very well said that the voice acting that they do for that episode is for that episode and that episode only and can't be used in any other material unless it's just a clip of that episode. Of course, Zim and Gur's costumes, when they're trying to blend in with society, would be absolutely fantastic alternate costume choices for the characters. The other obvious choice when it comes to an Invader Zim character is, of course, Dib. He is pretty much Zim's Earthling equal. It is very much their dynamic that drives the show forward. I mean, it's what makes the show work. You have this character who is fully aware of who Zim is and his intentions on Earth, and he's trying to stop him, but it's almost impossible for him to stop him. Luckily, Zim is just as inept on his side. They work so well together on the show. I imagine on the field they would also work well as fighters. Dib, in his own right, has a slew of technology you can pull from. Now, it may not be as good as Zim's, but I'm sure that you could pull a moveset for Dib that would make him a formidable fighter. Like the Fairly OddParents, you could pull from almost every side character, and they would work as an assist in some way. I'm picking Gaz as one. She could work as a character that does nothing at first, but if her video game is knocked out of her hands by another character accidentally hitting her, bumping into her, or anything disturbs her in some way, shape, or form, she could go absolutely nuts and then start attacking people. Tack would also be high up on my list of choice of assists. She is another Irken character that is revealed to us later in the series. It would be incredibly fun to see her either in her Irken form or in her human disguise just running amok on the stage, causing havoc and mayhem. Now, this next choice is so near and dear to my stomach that it's the one that I would choose above all else. Like, if I had one assist to bring up in this game and the one choice I had would be in the game no matter what, I'm going to choose Zim's parents. Zim's robot parents that he hastily puts together once he discovers that he would need parents to more blend in as a kid on Earth. And of course, it would be the most fitting to interrupt any fight for Zim's father to remind you that he has a case of...
Oh no! Honey, is it?
Yup. Diarrhea.
Now, of course, we can't talk about Invader Zim without talking about the absolutely gorgeous design work that goes into this world. I mean, it's one of the most striking Nicktoons that has ever existed. It's one that came literally at a left field in design. and just said, here I am, I'm completely different in both design and content. But also at the same time, feels like Nickelodeon. It feels like a Nicktoon. That's why Zim has always fit in perfectly with all these other Nicktoons, because at its core, it still thrives on that Nicktoon originality. Having pretty much any of the locations in the Invader Zim universe would make for an interesting stage. Anything with Zim's house in the background would just be iconic. Honestly, as I'm sitting here staring at the street, I'm thinking Mrs. Bitters coming out of nowhere as an assist would be something interesting too.
Why was there bacon in the soup?
I made it myself!
Next up, we're going to ChalkZone, another show that actually had its start all the way back in 1998 on Oh Yeah Cartoons, and had a substantial amount of shorts alongside the Fairly OddParents. And it was honestly a shock that it took so long for it to get its own show. ChalkZone was created by Bill Burnett and Larry Huber and ran for 4 seasons of 40 episodes. And it finally did on March 22nd, 2002. The show actually featured a bit of an older Rudy Tabooty than in the original shorts. If I'm not mistaken, and you can tell me if I am, I believe the show takes place a year after the original shorts take place. I know Rudy is older. Now, I have Rudy here as a fighter, but I also have Snap here as a fighter. But there's a catch. Only one of these two can take up the slot in my 74 fighters, and I'm actually leaning on Snap taking the place of the fighter, with Rudy taking the place of an assist that can draw various objects on the back of the stage that can, interact and whatnot. There's a few of those kind of assist trophies in Smash Brothers where an artist will draw something that'll come alive. You can do that with Rudy drawing in the background. I think that would be incredibly smart. You could also make a really good moveset with Rudy Tabooty if he has access to his chalk powers in the real world. I guess you would just have to suspend your disbelief with ChalkZone lore to make Rudy work. But Snap could also work as a fighter, and honestly, he's like the Mr. Game & Watch of this game, and I think as like a 2D chalk figure, I think you could make a pretty fun moveset with him that references the show, and then could also use Rudy's talents in a smart way as well, without having to stretch the lore of the show, unless you just wanted to say that the whole game is in a chalk universe, or unless you just wanted to say it was a video game.
Rudy, come on, you gotta draw something!
You can't go wrong with either choice. If you'd rather have Rudy as a fighter, go with Rudy as a fighter, have Snap as an assist. If you'd rather have Snap as a fighter, go with Rudy as an assist. Either way, I think we can all agree that a ChalkZone level, even if neither of these characters are a fighter in the game, a ChalkZone level has to happen. That could be so inventive and so beautiful and just run so smoothly if they just find a way to, just look at how they do any of the flat zone levels in the Super Smash Bros. Games and just emulate that, or the Duck Hunt level where it's got some depth even though it's a 2D space. Do that with ChalkZone. You could have a lot of fun with that. As far as assists go, you can obviously pull from a few other characters from the ChalkZone universe. Having Penny in some way, shape, or form would make sense. Having Biclops as a character that appears, you could have another reason to do another kind of 2D chalk-like character as an assist trophy. You could also have Skrull come out, who is the main villain from the ChalkZone universe, and have him run amok in the background.
3, 2, 1.
Got a blast!
Next up, we're covering fan favorite, The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, the television spin-off based off of the 2001 theatrical film Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. The TV show first premiered on July 20th, 2002, and remains to this day one of the most popular Nicktoons ever. The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius and its characters were created by Keith Alcorn, Steve Odenkirk, and John A. Davis. The show ran for 3 seasons and 61 episodes. These characters are beloved when it comes to Nickelodeon.
Any questions?
Yes. Are you going to finish that croissant?
Knock yourself out.
It's one of those shows that even though it's been off the air for this long, I know that there's still so much creativity to be had with Jimmy Neutron and his universe that they could bring the show back with just slightly updated animation, make it run just a little bit smoother, but keep the same designs of the characters, and just let that run for a few more years. Look, if Futurama can come back for just more amazing television, of course, when you're talking about Jimmy Neutron, you can't go any further than the man himself, Jimmy Neutron. You could absolutely make an incredible fighter out of Jimmy Neutron using a variety of his weapons and gadgets that he's created over the years. You could comb through the episodes of that show, the movie. Now, the one thought that I am unsure of is what to do with Goddard. Now, he could definitely be used as a weapon, but I don't think he should be used as Jimmy's primary weapon. I think showing off as many gadgets as you could would be the best case scenario. Definitely Goddard as an assist in some way would make sense as well. Maybe Goddard comes out and plays dead and just explodes after a few seconds. Something like that would make sense for the character, and then it would free Jimmy up to use more of his gadgets. But Goddard as well being there as some sort of just kind of flight assist or something for him to use would make sense. Certainly using the striped shirt design Jimmy Neutron from the original pilot would make sense as a nice little alternate costume and a wink to his origins. But also, and I just couldn't get the thought out of my head of making Jimmy's clones as alternate costumes. I mean, all you have to do is remodel the hair, change the expression, give evil Jimmy fluffier eyebrows. Like how Smash Brothers has 8-player Smash. Imagine 8-player Nickelodeon All-Star Ultimate with all of Jimmy's clones against one another. My next choice for a fighter is Sheen Estevez, one of Jimmy's best friends. Over the course of the show, he actually shows a decent prowess at hand-to-hand combat. There are certainly enough Sheen moments from both the adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius and his own show, Planet Sheen, that you could pull from to make a viable moveset. And also, it gives Sheen an alternate costume other than his Ultralord shirt. Although, I think I speak for most Jimmy Neutron fans in saying that I prefer the Ultralord shirt. Next up should be an obvious choice for most fans is Cindy Vortex. She is shown from very early on, even in the Jimmy Neutron movie, to have a pretty incredible physical moveset. She does karate. She is certainly strong. If you think Libby would work as an alternate costume for this as well, if her moveset ends up being a little bit more on the generic side, I'm okay with that, although I'm using Libby in a different way that we'll get to. Now, of course, I can't pull fighters from Jimmy Neutron without talking about Hugh Neutron, the man himself, one of the greatest Nickelodeon dads in the history of Nickelodeon. You could pull from some great Hugh Neutron moments to get an entirely original moveset from this character.
Yeah, I don't mind. Once when I was 7 years old, I sat on a banana. And of course, that changed my life.
And his fan base is calling for it. Hugh, I know you're out there on YouTube. I am here for you, buddy. We are going to get you out on the field fighting the other Nicktoons because it is only Donut Boy that can stand atop the rest of them. If I could make one argument for Hugh Neutron's inclusion in any video game, it's that he appeals to both boys, girls, and duck lovers.
Don't tell the others, but you're my favorite.
Now, for most Jimmy Neutron fans, it is the Hugh Neutron inclusion that is the chef's kiss of this video. But for me personally, it is Ultralord's inclusion that is the chef's kiss of this video. Now, I don't know about you, but I would love to be Ultralord's battle buddy, battling Robo Fiend in pitch combat. I cannot emphasize how awesome it would be to have Ultralord in a fighting game. Like, trust me, I'll take Hugh Neutron. Like, I'm excited for that. I will fight for that. But if you asked me for one Jimmy Neutron character other than Jimmy that I would include, it would be Ultralord. One of the nights that I was writing through the roster and kind of, going through things and writing things down, I played Ultra Sheen in the background. And that episode, lent itself so much to the ideas that you see here, including the idea that one of the assists should be Carl playing Llama-Palooza somehow in your game.
Shane, where are we?
Ride, Carl! Ride like the wind!
I don't know about you, but I would smile every time that comes up. As mentioned before, I have Libby here as an assist, and there are already characters in Super Smash Bros. That use the vibrations from musical instruments as a attack of some sort. So Libby in this regard with some sort of speaker or guitar. I almost had him in here as a fighter in a mech suit, but I decided to take him out in the same vein that I took Plankton out in that same regard. I just didn't want a mech suit for those characters. I would rather use, if I'm gonna put them in mech suits, I'd rather have them go over the top with their mech suits. So we have Professor Calamitous here, one of my favorite Nickelodeon villains, and like the #1 Jimmy Neutron villain. So it's obvious to have him here in some regard. Alongside Professor Calamitous, I think it would be appropriate to have his daughter, Beautiful Gorgeous, used in some way. At some point, I'll tell you that I had both Beautiful Gorgeous and Jet Fusion as fighters on my list. I ended up bumping them for other Nickelodeon characters. I tried to broaden out instead of just clumping most of my favorite choices as fighters. If you still think I did that, like I can only cut down so much before it's just I have to have it my way. This is my list, damn it. Just like a lot of the shows we're covering, there are so many iconic locations you could pull from in terms of levels. Having anything in front of the candy bar is going to be an easy way to have more of the town of Retroville kind of show up. The candy bar is this central location that everybody pretty much goes to for a snack. I love Sam, who runs it. He's one of my favorite Jimmy Neutron characters. So if I could have him in the background, just as an excuse to get Billy West in the studio just to do more Sam, I would be happy with that.
Get down, bend the knee, and touch the sky.
Next up, we're covering My Life as a Teenage Robot. Created by Rob Renzetti, the show first premiered on August 1st, 2003. Just like The Fairly OddParents and ChalkZone, My Life as a Teenage Robot originally had its start as a pilot on Oh Yeah Cartoons, known as My Neighbor is a Teenage Robot. And of course, by bringing up the show, it should be obvious that XJ9, aka Jenny Wakeman, would be the obvious choice of a fighter. Throughout the series, she shows a bunch of different abilities that you could pull from. I really hope that she's being worked on as a fighter for the new game, because she's just one of those obvious Nickelodeon choices. She has such an iconic look. She is just as beloved now, and the show has endured with fans and has just gotten more popular thanks to other ways to view the show, such as Nicktoons Network and streaming on Paramount Plus. Jenny has found a whole new fan base, a whole new generation to view that show in its entirety and to be able to appreciate it to the levels that it truly deserves. As far as assists from My Life as a Teenage Robot, you can't go wrong with Nora Wakeman, Jenny's mom. She has an impressive amount of gadgets on the show that you could pull from. You could also have assists from Jenny's friends, Brad, Tuck, and Sheldon, although I think a lot of these characters would be better suited to just be background elements in a level based off of My Life as a Teenage Robot, because I personally would pull the assists from Jenny's various sisters, the XJ series. If I remember the show correctly, I think each of the sisters has kind of a unique attribute to them, different from one another. You could, like I said, pull from any of these characters and pull an assist out of nowhere. Honestly, I almost made Vexus a fighter. I almost had her up there, but unfortunately she got bumped down for other characters. I'm still a massive fan of her. I think she's one of the most underrated Nick villains. Now, if you're like me and you're a big Nickelodeon fan, the sight of this logo should instantly tell you where I'm going with our next fighter. Helming from the show Drake and Josh, which made its premiere all the way on January 11th, 2004, our next fighter is the one, the only, Crazy Steve. I mean, just look at this picture. Look at Crazy Steve with the bras and the shoes. There's a fighter right there. You don't even really need to create much more of a moveset other than him smacking around shoes that have bras attached to them.
Cock-a-doodle-doo! The cow says boo! Cock-a-doodle-doo! The cow says boo!
I don't know what that would do with the ERSB for the game. I would take a T for teen if it could mean that that Crazy Steve could have his bra shoe weapon.
Come on, Dora! Andale! Mas rapido! You call yourself an explorer?
And of course, you could have a level take place at the premiere. Of course, it wouldn't be the premiere if you didn't have Helen in the background in some regard.
You ate my enchilada!
It was no!
You ate my enchilada!
It was no!
You ate my enchilada!
Just in quick honor, Danny, I got this Danny Phantom shot glass from Box Lunch, not sponsored, and I'm going to take a shot of G Fuel for this next segment, not sponsored. Cheers. I'm going Ghost! In my humble opinion, I find that Danny Phantom as a whole is one of the top 5 greatest Nickelodeon shows of all time. Regardless, animation, live action, doesn't matter. Man, I have no explanation of it, but I would love to have a conversation with Butch about Danny Phantom specifically. I would love to just pick his mind. And honestly, any of the minds that worked on that show. On to the fighters, and of course we have Danny Phantom. I don't really need to say much because he's already announced in the new game. Of course he's here. He's got a move set. That's it. There's not much more to say other than I love Danny Phantom. I do hope that Danny Fenton is an alternate costume. He can still use his ghost powers even, when he looks human. So it would make sense to use that as an alternate costume. Next up, we have Sam Manson.
It's hard to engage in a game of wits when your opponent is missing a few pieces.
I mean, certainly I would look at her appearances in Battle for Volcano Island and Attack of the Toy Bots to pull from some standard moves that she's made, but also she's gotten physical on the show before using some of the Fenton technology, so I would pull from that as well. Now, we can't pull fighters from the Danny Phantom universe without pulling the main bad guy himself, Vlad Masters, aka Vlad Plasmius. He has a whole slew of different powers than Danny and definitely fights in a different style, so you can certainly make his moveset a lot more different than Danny's. There are so many great villains from Danny Phantom that it felt like a shame to have 74 slots and not have a second one devoted to another Danny Phantom villain. And when I just looked at the range of villains, in both design and move possibilities, Skulker is just the one that became the obvious choice. Could you just imagine him on the field?
My girlfriend says I'm a lousy hunter.
I can't believe you have a girlfriend.
Now that just plain hurt.
We don't have a lot of big hulking characters in the Nicktoons lineup. A lot of them are like scrawny, smaller characters. So somebody like Skulker would just make a lot of sense. Next up, my last choice from Danny Phantom is, of course, Valerie Gray. Valerie in the show eventually has a bit of her life ruined by ghosts and decides to go on a mission to destroy and capture all of the ghosts, including Danny himself. Valerie herself shows off a decent amount of tech throughout the show, so you can certainly pull from those to make a completely different moveset than any of these characters and any of the tech that Skulker uses, because her weaponry would primarily be of the ghost hunting sense, whereas a few of the other characters like Danny and Vlad have ghost powers. Sam could also use some of the anti-ghost technology from Fenton Works, but I think Valerie would be really heavy on the anti-ghost technology than Sam would. As far as assists go, look no further than both Jack, Maddie, and Jazz Fenton, the entire Fenton family. Each of them could be all unique fighters in their own right. I would absolutely love to take a deep dive into the Danny Phantom universe, because that is a fighter list I would love to make. The Danny Phantom world is so rich with so many side characters. Jack, Maddie, and Jazz are all wonderful members of the Fenton family. Maddie herself was actually almost a fighter on this list at one point, but then Valerie took over that spot just in terms of the moveset. Tucker would make an excellent assist as well. He has a bunch of other technology that you could pull from. maybe just something goes awire and there's just something with missiles or something that attacks other characters. You could do something simple with him. Now, it would be incredibly weird to enter the Danny Phantom world and only pick humans for assists. So as far as ghosts are concerned, you can't go wrong with having the box ghost come out on the stage and start throwing boxes at people.
We're a package deal!
Now, yes, I'm going along with another concert character here, although I think Ember would be slightly different, because even though she would still be playing her song, she would also be attacking the other characters in the same way that she does Danny in her multiple appearances. And if I could just pull out a popular choice here, Dark Danny, Dan Phantom, Evil Danny, whatever you choose to call him from the Ultimate Enemy, he's one of my favorite characters in the show. His origin story is one of the it's depressingly good. It's one of the best origins of any character in Nickelodeon history. Like, go and watch The Ultimate Enemy if you've never watched it. It's one of the best Nickelodeon TV movies ever, bar none. That should have been a theatrical Danny Phantom movie. Just like many other locales we have touched upon when it comes to levels, having the iconic background of a building is always a good option. I think fighting in Amity Park in some way, shape, or form is a great idea, because you can feature a lot of ghosts at the same time as featuring a lot of other human characters that appear in the show, like Mr. Lancer or Dash. You could just have them in the background. But of course, you can't go wrong with having a level in the Ghost Zone as well. It's also an easy way to show off a bunch of different ghosts. Although between the two levels, if you could have these two together, they could have different ghosts that they show off. I don't think it's wrong to say that Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of, if not the greatest Nickelodeon show of all time. It's definitely in that top 5 up there with Danny Phantom. It's just one of the most epic stories that Nickelodeon has ever shown. It has a loud, proud, and enduring fan base that lives on to this day, and through countless disappointment of live-action projects, the brand is so important that Viacom gave the creators their own studio, Avatar Studios, to help keep this brand going moving forward. Like, this is a big deal. You're gonna have Avatar content for years to come from the original creators. If there is any show that is going to be the Fire Emblem of the Nickelodeon All-Star series, it is going to be Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that has nothing to do in design. It just is the sheer amount of characters you can pull from this universe, and all of them will have wonderful movesets. But we are going to start first with my boy Aang, the Avatar himself, the star of the original show. Aang is by far one of the strongest Nickelodeon characters we can pull from. Now, as far as moveset goes, I imagine Aang is going to use mainly airbending in his moveset, primarily because our next few fighters are going to go through the rest of the elements. Water is going to be primarily used by Katara, Earth is going to be primarily used by Toph, and Fire is going to be primarily used by Prince Zuko. Of course, I have pictured here some very easy alternate costumes you could have for the characters. Please make the Season 3 looks alternate costumes for all the characters. Now, one character that unfortunately got the boot in this regard was Azula. Now, I thought of her pretty much as being an alternate skin for Zuko, and that they could have a very similar moveset, but that with Azula, you would have more blue flame, blue lightning effect. Now, there is one more slot that I saved open for the Avatar universe, and that is, of course, the big bad himself, Fire Lord Ozai. Now, in terms of firebending, I am sure you can build a completely different moveset from him and Zuko, so they're not using the same moves. He is, of course, a really powerful character. This is the Ganondorf of this game. Now, my guy Sokka didn't make it in as a fighter, but with his boomerang, I couldn't choose a better choice as an assist, as well as Uncle Iroh, who makes an obvious assist in some regard, either physically or just with some meditation. Now, I think Boomy coming out in some regard would be an excellent way for him to just throw out some fists, but there wouldn't be a better Avatar reference that you can make than by having the cabbage guy in some regard as an assist. You could also have him as a background element where his cabbage cart is constantly in danger. Now, I know it would be pretty weird to have Aang fighting in front of himself in the iceberg, but that iceberg shot is so iconic that I think as the background of a level, it would just be really fun to have different fighting on different icebergs, and you have the ability to fall into the water. Ba Sing Se, I think, is also one of my favorite locations in the Avatar universe, so as a background level, I would just love to see that. And my pie-in-the-sky choice for another level from Avatar The Last Airbender is I would love for a Final Destination-like level to be during the final battle of Aang and Fire Lord Ozai. I'm not necessarily saying they have to fight in the background, but just having that atmosphere, those clouds, that lighting, and just a flat space like they're fighting on the rock right there. I am propping up this part of Avatar The Last Airbender as the Final Destination level, and it makes the most sense. Next up, we're picking a fighter from El Tigre, The Adventures of Manny Rivera. Created by Jorge R. Gutierrez and Sandra Iqueja, the show stars Manny Rivera as the superhero El Tigre. His father is also a superhero named White Pantera, and his grandfather is the supervillain Puma Loco. The show first premiered on February 19th, 2007. Only ran for one season of 26 episodes, but has such a unique design. And of course, with its characters like El Tigre being superheroes, are natural born fits for a fighting game. They have a natural moveset that you can pull from. So for here, I pulled both El Tigre and White Pantera as fighters. That leaves Puma Loco out as the outlier, but when it came to his mech suit, you could of course shrink it down to an appropriate size, but I felt like that was unfair to the character. I want him to have his mech suit out and just smacking some people around, so with an assist from Puma Loco, he comes out in his giant mech suit and he just gets to smack some people. I'm fine with that, but we also have Frida who could come out and assist in some way, shape, or form. If there's anything I really remember from this show, it's just its overall design. Its design has such a nice impact when I think about the show. I don't remember many scenes from it, I gotta be honest, but its design has a nice impact, and its location of Miracle City has a myriad of different locations that you could pull from, all of which are all unique from one another and can be used in a multitude of different ways for different levels. Now, if that silhouette is familiar to you, then you should know that the next fighter I'm choosing is, of course, Tak from Tak and the Power of Juju. Now look, I know that the television show Tak and the Power of Juju, developed by Nick Jennings, Jed Springham, and Mitch Watson, which ran for one season of 26 episodes and premiered on August 31st, 2007, Tak has a very long history with Nickelodeon, and being the fact that he started out as a video game character, it would make sense to have him appear in another video game. I remember Locke being a fairly funny character, but of course, the Poo Poo Nunu Village would make an incredible backdrop. I'm actually a sucker for a lot of foresty jungle levels, so, you know, I have the Hey Arnold one from the Jungle movie. I think the Poo Poo Nunu Village could be fun as well. Next up, we are tackling the Steve Odenkirk created Back at the Barnyard, based off of the film Barnyard. They went the same way as Jimmy Neutron, creating the movie first and then going on to create a television show spin-off. Now, I'll be completely honest in saying that Otis as a fighter was a late addition. Originally, I had him simply as an assist, but then one day I was just looking as the roster, I was laying everything out, and I'm like, you know, a giant cow character would make sense as a fighter. I don't know, it would just be a fun fighter to have. He's a big guy. We don't have a lot of big characters like this, so just out of necessity and then just being able to represent another show, I went with Otis. And of course, you can have the Barnyard as a level in the game to have a bunch of other characters appear in the background, as I've mentioned for pretty much every level. But the Barnyard itself just makes sense because all the characters are there anyway, so they might as well appear there. Any of the other side characters of the show, I'm sure you could pull from for a viable assist. If you're a fan of the show, mention in the comments which of these characters you would like to see, which one of them would make a great assist. Do you think any of these other characters would make another fighter? Do you think Back at the Barnyard should have a second fighter on its side? Let me know in the comments below. Next up, another creation out of the Schneider Bakery. We are covering iCarly, first premiering on September 8th, 2007. The obvious fighter choice here is one of the toughest Nickelodeon characters in the history of the channel, Sam Puckett. portrayed by Jeanette McCurdy. Now, of course, I respect Jeanette McCurdy's decision to leave acting behind. She is finding other ways in the entertainment industry to express herself as an artist. She doesn't ever have to come back to acting if she doesn't want, but she would have to admit that if you were to take the best Nickelodeon fighters in a fighting game, even in this dream scenario, Sam Puckett would have to be up there as some of the better fighters. I mean, look, you put a butter sock in her hand and she is one of the most dangerous people on the field. And of course, we don't have to use a realistic looking Sam. We could have a cartoonish looking one, because no matter how cartoony she looks, Sam Puckett is still going to be one of the most dangerous people you could select in a Nickelodeon fighting game, bar none. Now, since we're using iCarly, virtually any one of the other iCarly characters can appear as an assist in this dream game of mine, but if I could pick one, though, I would certainly have Gibby do something like this. And of course, regardless, now there could be no iCarly fighters or assists at all, and I would still want the iCarly set as a stage. It just makes the most sense. It's one of the most iconic Nickelodeon backdrops you could have, so just as a level on its own, even having characters in the background is a smart move. A show in the same vein as Oh Yeah Cartoons, known as Random Cartoons, first premiered on December 6th, 2008, and one of the shorts featured on Random Cartoons was one called Fanboy. Now, Random Cartoons first premiered on Nicktoons Network, and Fanboy, being one of the pilots, was one of the most obvious choices to be adapted into a full-fledged show. It just had the most promise from the get-go. But an interesting fact is that another show got its start on Random Cartoons, and that is, of course, Adventure Time. Cartoon Network's smash hit was actually in the hands of Nickelodeon first, before they handed it off to Cartoon Network to make into one of their biggest properties ever. But hey, we got Fanboy and Chum Chum out of it, and I actually really like Fanboy and Chum Chum. I think it's an underrated gem, and if you honestly said no to it after the first few episodes, I wouldn't blame you, but honestly, it gets so much better as the show goes on, and I think it shows a lot of its creativity in its later episodes on what it is and what it can be as an animated show, as a comedy. I love the characters of Fanboy and Chum Chum. They're definitely on the annoying end, but there's a lot of other characters in Nickelodeon that are on the annoying end, but are still beloved by fans alike. Now, I do not envision these two as separate fighters. I envision them as one fighter, a la the Ice Climbers, but more or less more like how I envisioned Ren and Stimpy, although I wouldn't have the changing mechanic. I would just have Fanboy as the one character you're controlling, using Chum Chum in a variety of ways. And as far as assists are concerned from the world of Fanboy and Chum Chum, you don't need to look further than Frosty Mart employee Boog, who's just going to serve out some bops on the field against whoever's in front of him.
I am gonna unleash my ultimate weapon, the H-Bop. Prepare for death, Bop! Bop!
Another character I like from Fanboy and Chum Chum is Kyle, a offshoot of the Harry Potter character, this magic kid who is not taken seriously at all by Fanboy and Chum Chum. It would be fun to get Jamie Kennedy to come in and record some new Kyle lines, but I think as an assist, he would make a lot of sense to throw out some magical spells that he's used in the show. I really dig the Fanboy and Chum Chum design. It's like this healthy mix between 3D and 2D. I know others out there might not be a fan of the design, but man, you can't deny that having the Frosty Mart as just a nice backdrop would make sense as a Fanboy and Chum Chum level. And that is going to be it for part 2. That is all of the fighters from the 2000s era. Do you have a favorite? Do you have a least favorite? Do you have any other characters that you would make as fighters? Any other characters you would make as assists? Any other levels you can think of? List them in the comments below. And would you like to see me deep dive into each and every one of these shows and find every fighter option, every assist option, every level option to make every show its own little mini Super Smash Bros. Game? Let me know in the comments below, because that's a series I would love to do for you guys. So thank you for coming aboard. This is Captain Eric signing off. We'll see you next time.